The rain hammered down on the sidewalk as Julian Prescott stumbled out of the black car, his face drained of all color. His driver reached for him, but Julian waved him away with a trembling hand. He'd made it through the business dinner. He just needed to get to his penthouse 3 blocks away. Walking sometimes helped when the episodes came. But this time was different. His vision blurred. The streetlights became smears of white against the dark sky. His legs turned to water beneath him. The ground rushed up to meet him, and he felt the cold, wet concrete against his palms as he collapsed. "Sir! Sir, can you hear me?" A woman's voice cut through the fog in his mind. Julian tried to focus. Through the rain, he saw a beautiful African-American woman kneeling beside him. She wore a server's uniform with a name tag that read Naomi. Her dark eyes were filled with concern, and her hands were steady as she checked his pulse. "I'm calling an ambulance," she said, pulling out her phone. "No," Julian managed to gasp. "No hospitals. They can't help me." Naomi hesitated, her finger hovering over the screen. "You just collapsed in the street. You need medical attention. Been to every specialist in the country." Julian forced the words out between labored breaths. "Spent millions. Nothing works." The rain soaked through both their clothes as Naomi made a decision. She helped him sit up slowly, supporting his weight with surprising strength for her slender frame. "My apartment is 2 minutes away. Can you walk?" Julian nodded, though he wasn't sure he could. But something in her calm confidence made him trust her. With Naomi's help, he struggled to his feet. She wrapped his arm around her shoulders and guided him down the street. Her apartment was small and tidy, nothing like the luxury Julian was used to. She settled him on her worn couch and brought him water and a warm blanket. As his breathing steadied, Julian studied her face. She couldn't be more than late 20s, with natural hair pulled back in a neat bun and kind eyes that seemed to see right through his expensive suit to the desperate, sick man underneath. "How long have you been sick?" she asked softly. 5 years. Julian's voice was hollow. "Started with fatigue. Then joint pain. Then my digestive system stopped working right. Some days I can barely get out of bed. The doctors call it an autoimmune condition, but every treatment fails. Every diet, every medication, every experimental therapy. I've seen specialists in Switzerland, Japan, everywhere. Nothing helps for long." Naomi was quiet for a moment, then said something that changed everything. "My grandmother used to say that sometimes the body remembers what the mind tries to forget. She helped people in our community when doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong with them." "Your grandmother was a doctor?" "No. She just understood that healing isn't always about medicine. It's about listening to what the body is trying to say." Naomi stood and went to her small kitchen. She returned with herbal tea that smelled of ginger and something else Julian couldn't identify. "Drink this. It will help settle your system." Julian took the cup, and for the first time in 5 years, he felt a spark of something he'd almost forgotten. Hope. Would you stay to see if Naomi's grandmother's wisdom could really heal a billionaire when modern medicine failed? Drop a comment with your thoughts. 3 days later, Naomi was working the lunch shift at Meridian, the upscale restaurant where she'd been employed for 2 years. She carried a tray of expensive entries to table 12 when she noticed him. Julian Prescott sat alone by the window, looking better than he had during their rainy night encounter, but still pale and drawn. Their eyes met across the dining room. He smiled slightly and gestured to the empty chair at his table. Naomi glanced at her manager, who nodded approval when he recognized the well-dressed customer. She set down her tray and approached Julian's table. "You're looking better," she said. "That tea you gave me actually helped. First time I've slept through the night in months." Julian leaned forward, his expression serious. "I need to talk to you about something important. Can you sit?" Naomi slid into the chair across from him, curious and a bit nervous. "I've spent the last 3 days researching your grandmother." Julian pulled out a tablet and showed her a screen filled with articles. Grace Harris. She was known throughout the community for her healing knowledge. People traveled from other states to see her. She passed away 2 years ago. Naomi felt the familiar ache in her chest. She raised me after my parents died. Everything I know about helping people, I learned from her. I want to hire you." Naomi blinked. "I have a job. I'll pay you $50,000 a month to help me figure out what's wrong and how to fix it." Julian's voice was steady, but his eyes held a desperate edge. "I know it sounds crazy, but I've tried everything else. Your grandmother's approach, whatever it was, it's the only thing that's given me any relief." $50,000. Naomi's mind reeled. That was more than she made in a year at the restaurant. She could pay off her student loans, help her cousin who was struggling with medical bills, maybe even go back to school. But helping a billionaire with a mysterious illness? She wasn't a doctor. What if she made him worse? "I'm scared," she admitted. "What if I can't help you? Then I'm no worse off than I am now." Julian reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of touching hers. "Please. I'm asking you to try. My grandmother always said that when someone asks for help, you give it if you can." She believed that healing knowledge was meant to be shared, not hoarded. Naomi thought of all the notebooks her grandmother had left behind, filled with recipes, remedies, and wisdom collected over 70 years. She thought of the people her grandmother had helped when conventional medicine had given up on them. "I'll do it," she said. "But I have conditions. You have to be completely honest with me about your symptoms. You have to follow the program exactly. And if at any point your regular doctor says what we're doing is dangerous, we stop." "Agreed." Julian's relief was visible. "When can you start?" "Give me 2 weeks to wrap things up here." Naomi stood, her heart pounding. "And Mr. Prescott? Thank you for trusting me. Call me Julian. And thank you for taking a chance on someone who's lost hope." As Naomi walked back to the kitchen, she felt her manager's approving nod. She just accepted the most important job of her life. She just hoped her grandmother's wisdom would be enough. That night, Naomi pulled out her grandmother's notebooks and began to read. The pages were filled with careful observations about diet, stress, sleep, and the connection between emotional pain and physical illness. Grace Harris had understood something that modern medicine often overlooked: the body was not separate from the mind and spirit. To heal one, you had to address them all. Naomi made notes, cross-referencing symptoms Julian had described with her grandmother's recorded cases. A pattern began to emerge. Julian's condition sounded similar to several people her grandmother had helped, people whose bodies had been attacking themselves because of unresolved trauma and chronic stress. She picked up her phone and texted Julian, "I think I know where to start. But it won't be easy. Are you ready?" His response came immediately, "I've been ready for 5 years." Naomi pulled her old sedan up to the iron gates of Julian's estate and questioned every decision that had led her to this moment. The property stretched across acres of manicured lawns and gardens. The main house looked like something from a magazine, all glass and stone and modern architecture. Julian met her at the front entrance, casually dressed in jeans and a sweater. He looked nervous. "I had the guest house prepared for you," he said, leading her down a stone path. "It has everything you'll need. Kitchen, office space, privacy. But you'll have access to the main house whenever necessary to monitor my progress." The guest house was bigger than Naomi's entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over a garden. The kitchen was equipped with top-of-the-line appliances. A bedroom with a king-sized bed occupied one wing, and a spacious office filled with natural light occupied the other. "This is too much," Naomi breathed. "You're moving your entire life to help me. It's the least I can do." Julian set her suitcases down in the bedroom. "So, where do we start?" Naomi pulled out her grandmother's notebooks and her own research. "We start by understanding that your body isn't broken. It's trying to protect you from something. We need to figure out what." Over the next 2 hours, Naomi asked Julian questions that no doctor had ever asked. Not just about his symptoms, but about his life. When did he last feel truly relaxed? What did he eat, not just the categories of food, but the actual meals? How much did he sleep? What were his stress levels like before he got sick? Julian answered honestly, and a picture began to emerge. He'd built his tech company from nothing, working 100-hour weeks for years. He'd gone through a difficult divorce just before the symptoms started. He had no close friends, no hobbies, no life outside of work. He ate irregular meals, often at his desk. He slept 4 or 5 hours a night. Your body is screaming for you to stop, Naomi said gently. And because you wouldn't listen, it made you stop. Julian was quiet for a long moment. So what do I do? We rebuild. From the ground up. Naomi opened her notebook. First, we fix what you're eating. Your gut is where most of your immune system lives. We're going to heal it with real food, not processed meals grabbed between meetings. Second, we establish a real sleep schedule. Third, we add movement, but gentle movement that doesn't stress your system more. And fourth, we deal with the emotional stuff you've been ignoring. The emotional stuff. Julian's jaw tightened. My grandmother used to say that the body keeps the score. Every hurt you don't process, every stress you don't release, your body holds onto it. Eventually, that holding becomes illness. For the first time since Naomi had met him, Julian's carefully controlled expression cracked. I don't know how to do that. I've spent my whole adult life pushing feelings aside to get things done. Then we'll learn together. Naomi smiled. Starting tomorrow morning at 7. We're going to cook breakfast together. I don't cook. You do now. That night, Naomi lay in the unfamiliar luxury of the guesthouse bed and wondered if she'd bitten off more than she could chew. Healing someone required them to be willing to change everything about how they lived. Was Julian really ready for that? Her phone buzzed with a text from him. Thank you for being here. For the first time in years, I feel like maybe I can get better. Naomi smiled in the darkness. Maybe this would work after all. 6 weeks into the program, Naomi stood in Julian's kitchen teaching him how to make bone broth from scratch. It was a Sunday morning, and rain pattered against the windows. Julian stirred the pot carefully, following her instructions exactly. This smells amazing, he said. I can't believe I've never made this before. Most people haven't. Naomi chopped vegetables for their lunch. But this is healing food. The nutrients in that broth will help repair your gut lining. That's where a lot of your problems started. The past 6 weeks had been intense. Naomi had completely overhauled Julian's diet, cutting out processed foods, sugar, and inflammatory ingredients. She'd established a strict sleep schedule that had him in bed by 10 every night. They did gentle yoga together each morning, and she'd introduced him to meditation. The results were starting to show. Julian's color had improved. The constant pain in his joints had lessened. His energy levels were higher than they'd been in years. He could make it through a full day without collapsing. Dr. Chen called yesterday, Julian said, referring to his longtime physician. She wants to run more tests. She doesn't believe the improvements are real. What did you tell her? That I'm doing them. But I also told her that for the first time since this started, I have hope. Julian turned from the stove to face Naomi. That's because of you. Naomi felt warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the steam rising from the pot. Over the past weeks, she and Julian had spent hours together. Cooking, talking, walking through his gardens. She'd learned that underneath the billionaire exterior was a man who was funny, curious, and deeply lonely. He'd told her about his childhood, raised by a single mother who worked 3 jobs. About building his company from a tiny apartment with maxed-out credit cards. About his marriage that had crumbled under the weight of his obsessive work habits. About realizing, too late, that he'd sacrificed everything that mattered for success that felt hollow. And Naomi had shared her own stories. Growing up with her grandmother after losing her parents in a car accident. Struggling to pay for community college. Working multiple jobs while caring for her grandmother during her final illness. The grief of losing the woman who had been her whole world. You're getting better because you're doing the work, Naomi said. I'm just the guide. You're more than that. Julian's voice was soft. You've become my friend. The first real friend I've had in years. Before Naomi could respond, Julian's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and sighed. It's Todd, my business partner. I should take this. Go ahead. I'll watch the broth. Julian stepped out onto the covered patio, and Naomi could see him through the glass doors, pacing as he talked. His body language was tense, stressed. When he came back inside 15 minutes later, his face was drawn. "Everything okay?" Naomi asked. "There's a crisis at work. A deal we've been negotiating for months is falling apart. Todd wants me to fly to Seattle tomorrow to salvage it." Naomi's heart sank. "Can someone else handle it?" "Not really. I'm the CEO. I built the relationships." "But..." Julian looked torn. "I know traveling right now, the stress of it could set back all the progress I've made. So what are you going to do?" Julian was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the rain. Then he picked up his phone and called Todd back. "I'm not coming," Naomi heard him say. "Send Angela. She's been working on this deal from the beginning, and she's more than capable. It's time I started trusting my team to handle things." He paused, listening. "I know it's a lot of money, but my health is worth more. I'll be available for calls if you need me, but I'm not getting on a plane." When he hung up, Naomi felt a surge of pride. That took courage. Or stupidity. That deal was worth $200 million. "Your life is worth more." Julian smiled. "My grandmother would have liked you." They spent the rest of the day cooking together, and when evening came, they sat in the garden with bowls of the soup they'd made. The rain had stopped, and the air smelled fresh and clean. "I never thought I'd say this," Julian said, "but I'm happier now, sick and healing in my garden, than I ever was when I was healthy and running my company 16 hours a day." "Maybe that's the real healing," Naomi said softly. "Learning what actually matters." It happened on a Wednesday morning, 10 weeks into Naomi's program. She arrived at the main house for their usual yoga session and found Julian on the bathroom floor, pale and shaking. "It's back," he gasped. "All of it. The pain, the fatigue, everything." Naomi's heart clenched with fear, but she forced herself to stay calm. She helped him to his bed and took his vitals. His pulse was rapid, his breathing shallow. This was the worst episode she'd seen since that first night in the rain. "I'm calling Dr. Chen," she said. "No. I trust you. Tell me what to do." "Julian, this is serious. You need medical attention. Please." His hand caught hers, gripping tight. "You said this might happen. You said healing isn't linear. That sometimes the body releases old trauma and it feels like getting worse. Were you wrong?" Naomi thought back to her grandmother's notes. Grace had written about healing crises, moments when the body purged toxins and old patterns, and it manifested as a temporary worsening of symptoms. But she'd also written about knowing the difference between a healing crisis and a genuine emergency. "I need to ask you questions," Naomi said. "Answer honestly. Did you eat something different yesterday?" "No. Same foods we've been eating." "Did something stressful happen?" Julian was quiet for a moment. "I had a video call with my ex-wife. First time we've spoken in 3 years. She wanted to discuss selling our old house. It brought up a lot of memories. Painful ones. There it was. The emotional trigger. Your body is processing," Naomi said. "All the stress and pain from that relationship, you've been holding it in your cells. Now that we've created space for healing, it's coming up to be released. But we need to help it move through safely." She spent the next hour with Julian, using techniques her grandmother had taught her. Gentle pressure points to calm his nervous system. Breathing exercises to regulate his heart rate. Cool compresses for his forehead. And most importantly, she talked him through the emotions that were surfacing. "Tell me about her," Naomi said softly. "Tell me what hurts." And Julian did. He talked about falling in love with a woman who wanted the version of him that existed before success. How she'd felt betrayed when his company took off and he became consumed by work. How they'd grown into strangers sharing a house. How the divorce had felt like failure, and he'd responded by working even harder to prove he was worth something. "I never grieved it," Julian whispered. "I just moved on to the next deal, the next goal. And my body remembered what I tried to forget." By evening, Julian's symptoms had calmed. He was exhausted but no longer in crisis. Naomi made him a simple dinner and sat with him while he ate. "I almost gave up today," he admitted. When I felt that bad again, I thought maybe all of this was pointless. Maybe I'm just broken and nothing can fix me. You're not broken. You're healing. And healing is messy and hard, and sometimes it feels like going backward. But you're not the same person you were 10 weeks ago. Naomi reached over and squeezed his hand. You're facing things you've avoided for years. That takes more courage than building a billion-dollar company. Stay tonight, Julian said suddenly. Not in the guest house. Here, in the main house. I don't want to be alone. Naomi knew she should probably maintain professional boundaries. But the vulnerability in his voice, the fear that he was trying so hard to hide, it broke through her hesitation. I'll stay, she said. But you need to sleep. Rest is part of healing too. She set up in the guest room down the hall from Julian's master suite. At 2 a.m, she woke to find him standing in her doorway. I can't sleep, he said. Can we talk? They ended up in his living room, wrapped in blankets, talking until dawn. About fear and hope and what it meant to rebuild a life. About second chances and whether people could really change. About loneliness and connection and the courage it took to let someone see you at your worst. Are you invested in Julian and Naomi's journey? Subscribe to see if love can bloom while healing the deepest wounds. As the sun rose over the garden, Julian looked at Naomi with an expression she couldn't quite read. Whatever happens, he said, whether I get completely better or not, meeting you changed my life. You gave me something I'd lost. You gave me myself back. 4 months into the healing program, Naomi stood in Julian's home gym watching him complete a set of resistance exercises. His form was strong, his breathing steady. The man in front of her bore little resemblance to the one who had collapsed in the rain. Julian had gained healthy weight. His skin glowed. The constant pain that had plagued him was gone. He slept 8 hours a night and woke refreshed. He could work, exercise, and engage with life in ways that had been impossible for 5 years. How do you feel? Naomi asked as he finished. Strong. Really strong. Julian wiped his face with a towel, grinning. I went hiking yesterday for 3 hours. 3 hours. 6 months ago, I couldn't walk around my own house without getting exhausted. Dr. Chen had run extensive tests the previous week, and the results had shocked her. Julian's inflammatory markers were normal. His immune function had stabilized. Whatever had been causing his body to attack itself had quieted. I need to document this, Dr. Chen had told Naomi. Whatever protocol you're using, it's working better than anything I've seen in 30 years of practice. Now, Julian poured them both glasses of the fresh juice they made each morning and led Naomi out to the garden. It was early June, and roses bloomed along the stone paths. I want to do something, Julian said. To thank you properly. You're already paying me more than I ever imagined making. Not just payment. Investment in your future. Julian pulled out his tablet. I want to fund your education. Full tuition, whatever program you want. Holistic health, nutrition, anything that interests you. You have a gift, Naomi. You should have the formal training to go with your grandmother's wisdom. Naomi's breath caught. Julian, that's too much. It's not nearly enough. You saved my life. His voice was intense. Let me do this. Please. Naomi thought about her dreams, set aside when money was tight. She'd always wanted to study integrative medicine, to combine her grandmother's traditional knowledge with modern understanding. With proper training, she could help so many more people. Okay, she said softly. Yes. Thank you. Julian's smile was brilliant. Good. I already reached out to several programs. They're all eager to accept you based on what you've accomplished with me. They walked through the garden, and Naomi felt the shift in the air between them. Something had changed over the past months. The professional boundaries they'd maintained had become blurred. Late-night conversations had grown more personal. Accidental touches lingered longer than necessary. Naomi had tried to ignore the growing attraction she felt for Julian. He was her client, her employer. Getting involved would be complicated and potentially disastrous. But her heart didn't care about logical concerns. There's something else I need to tell you, Julian said, stopping by a fountain. Todd wants me to come back to the company full-time. He says we're at a critical juncture and they need my leadership. Naomi's stomach tightened. What did you say? I said I needed to think about it. Because the truth is, I don't want to go back. Julian turned to face her fully. These past 4 months have been the happiest of my life. Not despite being sick, but because being sick forced me to stop and figure out what actually matters. And what matters is this. Being present. Being healthy. Being with people I care about. His eyes held hers, and Naomi felt her pulse quicken. I care about you, Julian continued, his voice low. More than I should, probably. More than is professional or appropriate. I know there's a power dynamic here, and I would never want to make you uncomfortable. But I also can't keep pretending that this is just a working relationship anymore. Naomi's heart hammered in her chest. Julian. You don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know. Because hiding it was starting to feel like lying, and I promised you I'd always be honest. He stepped back, giving her space. Nothing has to change. We can keep things exactly as they are. I just couldn't go another day without telling you the truth. Naomi looked at this man who had become so important to her. Who had trusted her with his health and his vulnerability. Who had shown her that second chances were possible and that healing could transform not just a body but an entire life. What if I don't want things to stay the same? She heard herself say. Julian's breath caught. What do you mean? I mean I care about you too. I've been trying not to because it seemed impossible. We're from different worlds, we met under complicated circumstances, and there are 100 reasons why this is a bad idea. Naomi took a step closer to him. But my grandmother used to say that the heart knows its own truth. And my heart has been trying to tell me something for weeks now. What's it saying? Julian's voice was barely a whisper. That sometimes the most illogical thing is exactly the right thing. Julian reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his hand cupped her cheek with infinite gentleness. I don't want to rush this. I don't want to mess this up. Then we'll take it slow. We'll figure it out together. Naomi leaned into his touch. Just like we figured out how to heal you. They stood there in the garden, the space between them charged with possibility. They didn't kiss, not yet. But they both knew that something profound had shifted, and there was no going back to the way things were before. Later that evening, Naomi returned to the guest house and found an envelope on her desk. Inside was information about integrative medicine programs at top universities, each one offering full scholarships in Julian's name. There was also a handwritten note. Whatever happens between us, your education is yours. No strings, no conditions. You deserve every opportunity to share your gifts with the world. Thank you for giving me my life back. J. Naomi pressed the note to her chest and smiled. She was falling in love with a billionaire, and somehow, impossibly, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Todd Mitchell arrived at the estate on a bright Saturday morning, driving a silver sports car that looked out of place among the gardens and tranquility. Naomi watched from the guest house as Julian greeted his business partner with a handshake that looked tense even from a distance. She'd known this conversation was coming. Julian had been putting it off for 2 weeks, but Todd had insisted on an in-person meeting. The company needed decisions about expansion, about a potential acquisition, about Julian's role going forward. An hour later, Julian texted her, "Can you join us? I want Todd to understand what's happened." Naomi walked to the main house, nervous about meeting the man who represented the life Julian was questioning. Todd was in his mid-40s, fit and polished in an expensive suit. He stood when she entered the living room, his expression curious. "Todd, this is Naomi Harris," Julian said. "She's the person responsible for my recovery." Todd's eyebrows rose. "I thought you were seeing specialists." "I was. For 5 years. They couldn't help me." Julian gestured for Naomi to sit. Naomi took a different approach. One that actually worked. For the next 30 minutes, Julian explained everything. The dietary changes, the stress reduction, the emotional work. Todd listened with increasing skepticism, but he couldn't argue with the results. Julian looked better than he had in years. "This is great," Todd said finally. Really great. So now you can come back full-time. We need you, Julian. The board is getting nervous about your extended absence. If you're healthy now, there's no reason you can't resume your role as CEO. Julian was quiet for a long moment. Naomi could see him choosing his words carefully. The thing is, Todd, I don't want to come back. Not the way I was before. What does that mean? It means I almost died building this company. I sacrificed my health, my marriage, any semblance of normal life. And for what? More money I don't need. More success that left me empty. Julian leaned forward. I want a different life now. One where work is part of what I do, not all of who I am. Todd's face darkened. You can't be serious. You're going to walk away from everything we built. I'm not walking away. I'm stepping back. I'll stay on the board, I'll consult on major decisions, but I want Angela to take over as CEO. She's been running things brilliantly in my absence. It's time to make that permanent. Angela doesn't have your vision, your drive. Maybe that's a good thing. Julian's voice was firm. Maybe the company needs someone who can lead without burning themselves out. Someone who has a life outside the office. Todd stood abruptly. I can't believe this. 5 years of being sick and now that you're better, you're just giving up. I'm not giving up. I'm choosing differently. Julian stood as well. For the first time in my adult life, I'm choosing health and happiness over achievement. I'm choosing to actually live instead of just work. This is because of her, isn't it? Todd's gaze shifted to Naomi. She's got you convinced that you need to abandon your responsibilities. She saved my life, Julian said, his tone dangerously quiet. And she helped me see that I was living wrong. That success without health, without relationships, without joy, that's not success at all. That's just expensive misery. Todd grabbed his briefcase. The board isn't going to accept this. Then they'll have my resignation. I'm done letting other people's expectations dictate my life. After Todd stormed out, Julian sank back onto the couch, looking drained. Naomi sat beside him and took his hand. That was hard, she said. Yeah. But also necessary. Julian squeezed her fingers. I meant what I said. I'm not going back to that life. It almost killed me. What will you do instead? Julian turned to her with a small smile. I have some ideas. But first, I want to ask you something. Would you have dinner with me tonight? A real date. Not as my health consultant, but as someone I'm crazy about. Naomi's heart fluttered. I'd love that. That evening, Julian took her to a small Italian restaurant in town, far from the fancy establishments he usually frequented. They sat at a corner table, sharing pasta and wine, talking and laughing like any normal couple. I've been thinking about what I want to do next, Julian said over dessert. I want to create something meaningful. Something that helps people the way you helped me. What did you have in mind? A wellness center. A place where people who've been failed by conventional medicine can find alternative approaches. We'd combine traditional healing wisdom with modern research. Offer programs like the one you designed for me. Julian's eyes were bright with enthusiasm. And I want you to run it. Be the director. Share your grandmother's knowledge with people who desperately need it. Naomi's breath caught. Julian, I haven't even started my formal education yet. You have something more important than formal education. You have real wisdom and genuine compassion. The degree will come, and it will make you even better. But you're already qualified to lead this. He reached across the table and took both her hands. Say yes. Build this with me. We can help so many people. Naomi thought of her grandmother, of all the people Grace had helped over the years. She thought of the knowledge contained in those precious notebooks, wisdom that deserved to be shared widely. Yes, she said. Let's do it. Julian's smile was radiant. After dinner, he drove them back to the estate, but instead of heading inside, they walked through the gardens under the stars. The night air was warm, fragrant with roses and jasmine. I need to tell you something, Julian said. I'm falling in love with you. Actually, I think I already have fallen. Completely. Naomi stopped walking and turned to face him. Her heart was so full it felt like it might burst. I love you too. I've been trying not to, trying to be sensible about it. But somewhere between teaching you to cook and watching you choose health over wealth, I fell completely in love with you. Julian cupped her face in both hands, his touch gentle. Can I kiss you? Please. Their first kiss was soft and sweet, full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. We're really doing this, Julian murmured. Building a life together. Building something that matters. We really are. Naomi rested her forehead against his. My grandmother would have loved you. I wish I could have met her. She's still here. In everything I do. In everything we're going to do together. They stood in the garden for a long time, holding each other, planning their future under the stars. The next morning, Naomi woke in the guest house with the memory of Julian's kiss still tingling on her lips. Everything had changed between them, and she felt both thrilled and terrified. She found Julian in the main house kitchen, making breakfast. He looked up when she entered, and his face broke into a smile that made her heart skip. Good morning, he said softly. Good morning. They moved around the kitchen together with easy familiarity, preparing eggs and fresh fruit. But everything felt different now, charged with new awareness. Every accidental touch sent electricity through Naomi's body. Every shared glance felt significant. I've been thinking, Julian said as they sat down to eat. About the wellness center. I want to do this right. Not just throw money at it, but really build something sustainable and meaningful. Tell me what you're thinking. I want to find a property in the community where you grew up. Where your grandmother practiced. It should be a place people can access easily, not hidden away in some wealthy neighborhood. Julian pulled out his tablet, showing her properties he'd already researched. And I want to hire people from the community to staff it. Train them, pay them well, create real jobs. Naomi looked at the screen, then at Julian. You've really thought about this. I spent most of last night thinking about it. About what your grandmother would have wanted. About how to honor her legacy properly. He reached for her hand. This isn't my project. It's ours. Your vision, your grandmother's wisdom, my resources. Together. They spent the morning discussing plans. The center would offer multiple services, nutritional counseling, stress management classes, movement therapy, emotional support groups. They'd work with doctors, not against them, creating a bridge between conventional and alternative approaches. We should have a garden, Naomi said. A healing garden where people can grow their own food, connect with nature. My grandmother always said that touching the earth was therapeutic. Perfect. We'll include that. By afternoon, they'd drafted a comprehensive proposal. Julian sent it to his lawyer to begin the legal formation of a non-profit foundation. Then he turned to Naomi with a serious expression. I need to talk to you about something important. About us. Naomi's stomach tightened. Okay. There's going to be attention when people find out we're together. Media attention, probably. People will say things about you, about us. They'll assume you're with me for my money, or that I'm taking advantage of some power dynamic. Julian's jaw tightened. I need to know if you're ready for that. Because I will defend you with everything I have, but it's still going to be hard. Naomi had thought about this already. She knew dating a billionaire would come with scrutiny. But she also knew what she felt was real. People can think whatever they want, she said. I know why I'm here. You know why I'm here. That's what matters. You're sure? I'm sure. She moved closer to him. Julian, I spent my whole life taking care of my grandmother, then working jobs that barely paid the bills. I never had time for dating or relationships. And then I met you, and everything changed. Not because of your money, but because of who you are. You're kind and honest and brave enough to change when you realized you needed to. That's what I fell in love with. Julian pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. I don't deserve you. Yes, you do. You deserve to be loved and to be happy. Just like everyone does. They kissed again, longer this time, deeper. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. Come on, Julian said, taking her hand. I want to show you something. He led her to his home office, a room she'd rarely entered. One wall was covered with photographs. Pictures of his mother, who had passed away 5 years ago. Pictures of him as a young man, scrappy and determined. And there, in the center, was a new photo, Naomi in the garden, laughing at something he'd said, sunlight on her face. "When did you take that?" she asked. 2 weeks ago. You didn't notice. Julian stood beside her, looking at the photo. "I put it up because every time I see it, I remember what real happiness looks like. That's what you've given me." Naomi felt tears prick her eyes. "You've given me so much too. A future I never imagined. Purpose. Love." They spent the rest of the day together, alternating between planning the wellness center and simply enjoying each other's company. They cooked dinner together, danced in the kitchen to old jazz records, talked about everything and nothing. As the sun set, they sat on the patio, watching the sky turn pink and gold. "I want you to move into the main house," Julian said. "Not the guest house. Here, with me. I know it's fast, but I also know how I feel. I love waking up knowing you're near. I want to fall asleep beside you." Naomi considered. It was fast. They'd only been together as a couple for a few days. But they'd also been living in close proximity for months, learning each other's rhythms and habits. In many ways, they already knew each other better than most couples who'd dated for years. "Okay," she said. "Yes. But I'm keeping some space in the guest house for when I need quiet to study." "Deal. Deal." Julian kissed her forehead. "Thank you for taking a chance on me. Thank you for being worth the chance." Subscribe to follow Julian and Naomi's love story as they build something beautiful together. That night, for the first time, Naomi fell asleep in Julian's arms, feeling safer and more loved than she'd ever imagined possible. 6 months after that rainy night when Julian collapsed on the sidewalk, he stood in Dr. Chen's office receiving news that seemed almost miraculous. "Your blood work is perfect," Dr. Chen said, studying the test results with barely concealed amazement. "Inflammatory markers are normal. Immune function is optimal. By every measurable standard, you're in complete remission." Julian looked at Naomi, who sat beside him holding his hand. "So I'm cured? I don't like to use that word with autoimmune conditions. But what I can say is that whatever protocol you've followed has put your condition into deep, sustained remission. If we didn't have your previous records, I would never know you'd been sick." Dr. Chen set down the papers. "I want to publish a case study on your recovery, with your permission. Other doctors need to see this." "Only if Naomi gets full credit," Julian said immediately. "She's the one who figured out what my body needed." Dr. Chen turned to Naomi with respect. "I'd like to collaborate with you on the paper. Your approach combining nutritional therapy, stress management, and emotional healing, it's exactly what integrative medicine has been advocating for years. You've proven it can work." Naomi felt a surge of pride. "I'd be honored." They left the doctor's office holding hands, both grinning. Julian was officially healthy, and their dream of the wellness center was becoming reality. They'd found the perfect property in Naomi's old neighborhood, a beautiful building with space for treatment rooms, a teaching kitchen, and yes, a healing garden. "We need to celebrate," Julian said. "Properly." He took her to the property they'd purchased. Construction had already begun, and the place was a hive of activity. Workers were transforming the old building into something special, with input from Naomi at every stage. "Come with me," Julian said, leading her through the construction site to the back, where the garden area was being prepared. Someone had already planted the first beds, and green shoots were emerging from the rich soil. In the center of the garden space, under a bower of climbing roses, Julian stopped and turned to Naomi. His expression was nervous, excited, full of love. 6 months ago, I was dying," he said. "Not just physically, but in every way that mattered. I'd built an empire, but I had no life. And then you saved me. Not just from the illness, but from the empty existence I was living." Naomi's heart began to race as Julian reached into his pocket. "You taught me that healing isn't just about fixing what's broken. It's about building something new, something better." He dropped to one knee, pulling out a small velvet box. "Naomi Harris, You are the best thing that ever happened to me. You're my partner, my love, my inspiration. Will you marry me? He opened the box to reveal a ring, a simple, elegant diamond that caught the sunlight. Naomi felt tears stream down her face. Yes. Yes, absolutely yes. Julian stood and slipped the ring onto her finger, then kissed her deeply while construction workers around them cheered and applauded. When they finally broke apart, both were crying and laughing at the same time. I love you so much, Naomi said. I love the life we're building together. We're going to help so many people, Julian said. Just like your grandmother did. We're going to show them that healing is possible, that change is possible, that it's never too late to start over. They spent the rest of the day at the construction site, planning the final details. Naomi would start the integrative medicine program in the fall, learning alongside practicing in the center. They'd already hired staff, people from the community who were passionate about healing and helping others. The grand opening was scheduled for 3 months away, and they'd already received hundreds of applications from people seeking help. People who'd been told nothing could be done for them. People who needed hope. That evening, back at the estate, they called Naomi's family to share the engagement news. Her cousins screamed with joy, her aunts cried happy tears. Everyone wanted to know about the wedding plans. We're thinking something simple, Naomi told them. In the healing garden at the center. A celebration of new beginnings. After the calls, Julian and Naomi sat in their favorite spot in the garden, watching the stars come out. I wish my grandmother could see this, Naomi said softly. All of it. The center, us, everything we're building. I think she does see it. Julian pulled her close. Everything good in my life now exists because of what she taught you. Her wisdom is living on through you, through us, through everyone we're going to help. She would have loved you, Naomi said. She always said that real strength isn't about never falling down. It's about getting back up and learning from what knocked you down. That's exactly what happened to me. I fell as hard as a person can fall. And you helped me get back up. Not to go back to what I was, but to become something better. They sat together in comfortable silence, planning their future. The wedding would be in the spring, when the garden would be in full bloom. They'd invite everyone who'd been part of their journey. Dr. Chen, the construction workers, the staff they'd hired, the community members who'd supported them. I want to establish a scholarship program, Julian said suddenly. In your grandmother's name. For people who want to study integrative healing but can't afford it. Naomi turned to him with shining eyes. That's perfect. She would be so proud. So would my mother. She always said real success is measured by how many people you help, not how much money you make. Julian kissed Naomi's temple. I finally understand what she meant. As they headed inside, Naomi looked back at the gardens one more time. 6 months ago, her life had been small and limited, defined by survival rather than possibility. Now she was engaged to an incredible man, about to open a wellness center that would help hundreds of people, and pursuing her dream of formal education in healing. Her grandmother had been right. The universe provided when you were brave enough to step forward and help others. The morning of the wellness center's grand opening dawned bright and clear. Naomi stood in the healing garden, surrounded by beds of herbs and vegetables, and felt her grandmother's presence in the gentle breeze. The center gleamed in the sunlight, transformed from a rundown building into a beautiful space of hope and healing. The sign above the entrance read, Grace Harris Community Wellness Center, founded by Julian Prescott and Naomi Harris. Everything looks perfect, Julian said, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. Are you ready? I'm nervous, Naomi admitted. What if people don't come? What if we can't help them? People are already lining up at the front. We had to add extra chairs for the opening ceremony. Julian turned her to face him. And as for helping them, you helped me when no one else could. You have your grandmother's gift, Naomi. Trust it. The opening ceremony was more than they'd imagined. Over 300 community members attended, along with local officials, healthcare providers, and media. Dr. Chen gave a speech about the importance of integrative approaches to health. Todd, who had eventually come around to supporting Julian's new direction, spoke about the power of choosing differently. But the most moving moment came when Naomi stepped up to the microphone. "My grandmother used to say that healing happens in community," she began, her voice steady despite her nerves. "That we weren't meant to suffer alone or get well alone. She believed that everyone has wisdom to share and that the answers to our health problems often lie not in expensive treatments, but in ancient knowledge combined with modern understanding and genuine care." She told the story of meeting Julian, of how desperate he'd been, of how conventional medicine had failed him. She explained the approach they'd taken, emphasizing that they never rejected medical care but rather supplemented it with nutrition, stress management, and emotional healing. "This center is for everyone who's been told nothing more can be done," Naomi continued. "Everyone who's tired of being sick, who wants to take charge of their health, who believes that healing is possible. We're here to walk that journey with you, to provide support, knowledge, and hope." The crowd erupted in applause. Afterward, people lined up to tour the facility. They saw the teaching kitchen where nutrition classes would be held, the movement studio designed for gentle exercise, the counseling rooms where emotional healing could begin, and of course, the beautiful garden where people could connect with nature and grow their own healing foods. By the end of the day, they'd enrolled 50 people in their first programs. 50 people ready to begin their own healing journeys. As the sun set and the last visitors left, Julian found Naomi sitting in the garden, looking tired but happy. "We did it," he said, sitting beside her. "We really did. And there's one more thing we need to do." Julian stood and offered his hand. "Come with me." He led her to a newly revealed section of the garden. There, under an arch covered in climbing roses, was a beautiful stone bench. A plaque on it read, "In memory of Grace Harris, who taught us that healing begins with love." Naomi's eyes filled with tears. "Julian. I wanted her here. Wanted people to sit here and remember that healing isn't just about protocols and treatments. It's about love, compassion, and the belief that everyone deserves to be well." He took both her hands. "Your grandmother gave you that belief, you gave it to me, and now we're giving it to everyone who walks through these doors. She would have loved this so much. I know she would. And I know she'd be proud of you. I'm proud of you." Julian pulled her close. "You changed my entire life, Naomi. You gave me health and purpose and love. You gave me a reason to be better. You did that yourself. I just showed you the path. We walked it together. And we're going to keep walking together." He kissed her softly. "For the rest of our lives." 2 months later, on a perfect spring day, Naomi and Julian were married in the healing garden, surrounded by family, friends, and community members. Naomi wore a simple white dress, and Julian wore a suit the color of the sky. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promising to support each other's growth, to face challenges together, and to never stop believing in the power of healing and love. Dr. Chen officiated, speaking about the miracle of witnessing not just physical healing but the transformation of two lives that found each other at exactly the right moment. As Naomi and Julian kissed as husband and wife, the crowd cheered. Flower petals filled the air, floating down like blessings. At the reception, held in the center's main hall, people shared stories. Patients talked about improvements they'd already seen in their health. Staff members expressed gratitude for jobs that felt meaningful. Community leaders praised the center's impact. But the best moment came when one of the first patients, a woman named Barbara who'd been struggling with chronic illness for a decade, stood to speak. "I came here 3 weeks ago because I tried everything else and nothing worked," Barbara said, her voice thick with emotion. "I was ready to give up. But Naomi sat with me for 2 hours, listening to my story, asking questions no doctor had ever asked. She didn't promise a miracle. She promised to walk with me toward healing. And in 3 weeks, I feel better than I have in years." Barbara looked directly at Naomi and Julian. "Thank you for building this. Thank you for believing that people like me deserve hope. You saved my life by giving me back my faith that healing was possible." Naomi squeezed Julian's hand under the table, both of them blinking back tears. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Julian pulled Naomi onto the dance floor one more time. They swayed together to soft music, her head on his shoulder, his arms wrapped securely around her. "What are you thinking?" Julian murmured. I'm thinking about how a year ago, I was a waitress with student debt and no real direction. And now I'm married to my best friend, running a wellness center, about to start graduate school, and helping people heal. Naomi looked up at him. I'm thinking about how one rainy night changed everything. The night I collapsed on the sidewalk and you decided to help a desperate stranger. You weren't a stranger. You were someone who needed help, and I could give it. That's what my grandmother taught me. When someone asks for help and you have something to offer, you give it. And I'm so grateful you did. Julian kissed her forehead. I love you, Naomi Prescott. Naomi smiled at hearing her new name. I love you too. They danced until the stars came out, then walked hand in hand through the garden they'd created together. The same garden where Julian had proposed, where they'd married, where hundreds of people would come to find their own paths to healing. Naomi paused by her grandmother's memorial bench and placed her hand on the cool stone. We did it, Grandma, she whispered. We're helping people, just like you did. Your wisdom lives on. Julian stood beside her, his arm around her waist. Together they looked out at the center, at the lights glowing warmly in the windows, at the garden full of life and promise. This was just the beginning. There would be challenges ahead, patients who struggled, setbacks and difficult days. But there would also be victories, transformations, and moments of pure joy when someone who'd lost hope found it again. Julian had learned that healing was possible, that change was possible, that it was never too late to choose differently. And together, he and Naomi would spend the rest of their lives helping others learn the same lessons. As they turned to head home, ready to begin their new life as husband and wife, Naomi felt complete peace. She'd found her purpose, her partner, and her path. She'd honored her grandmother's legacy while creating something uniquely her own. The future stretched out before them, full of possibility and promise. And they would face it together, with love, with hope, and with the unshakable belief that healing begins when you're brave enough to ask for help and generous enough to give it.